Alright, this is the patch 7.8 rundown, and this is the second take that we're going to be attempting to do. So anyways, as I said before, there's some changes that are inside of this patch that I wasn't expecting, and I thought that this patch would be the big patch, but apparently it's not, so we're just going to get right into things. Aatrox Hellbent attack speed up and now refreshes on monsters, W missing health now up. This doesn't really change anything. Aatrox is still a bad champion. The passive Bloodwell, Hellbent now refreshes on monsters, 20 to 50% scaling attack speed to 30 to 60% scaling. That's nice. He basically gets a dagger. But again, it doesn't really do anything. He has bad matchups up in top lane. He can't actually exist inside of the jungle. And the change that was made to his passive a long time ago just makes him feel very clunky and unreliable. And if he falls behind, he's a champion that needs to get ahead. If he falls behind, he doesn't feel like he does anything. And there's a lot of other champions that exist in the game that do what he does, but better. And they don't have as much of a reliance on snowballing and getting ahead. And the minor jungler assistance that he has inside of his kit is sort of nice, and the gank survivability that he has inside of his kit is sort of nice. But other than that, the current way that the items exist in the game and just the current meta isn't really that suited for him. The W Bloodthirst heal 5% up to 6.5% is also virtually negligible. Amumu, passive now deal true damage, passive numbers down. Passive Curch Touch, 15% of magic damage dealt calculated after damage was reduced by magic resist, 10% of magic damage dealt calculated before that damage was reduced. So in most cases, this is going to be a buff. The thing that I didn't recognize about Amumu in the previous thing was this was for all teammates, I believe, right? So it's not just for Amumu, which is even more bonkers because that actually lets you get away with double AP compositions in competitive while having an Amumu continue to go like hybrid off-tank AP. And I think that that's really, really good because if you have like a if you have a Mumu Rumble or something, and then you have like, I don't know, a Syndra or whatever else inside of the mid lane, that is absolutely bonkers for damage. And with some of the changes that I know they're planning in future patches, I think that this helps set Amumu up a little bit more. W Despair, 1 to 3% of the target's maximum health per second to 1 to 2%. To 1 to 2% of the target's max health. A little bit surprised. I thought that they were supposed to add an AP ratio here. At least that's what I saw in the PBE wrap-up thing, but it's apparently not here. In which case I would have said that it was a buff because all that you would have needed was the obvious amount of AP that Amumu would normally get inside of a game in order to make it deal more damage. But a little bit surprised to not see that, but this change isn't going to break him anyway. One of the other things that's problematic for champions like Amumu, Sejuani, Skarner, etc. is that Cinderhulk junglers are just in a pretty bad spot right now, and Cinderhulk probably needs a little bit of love. I would be completely content with that. I'm all for League of Tanks. Ivern. A single brush no longer blocks vision of epic monsters. W Brushmaker. Dropping brush directly on top of an epic monster no longer hides it from enemy vision. You can still deny enemy vision of an entire area by creating walls of brush, therefore denying vision of the monster. So I don't think that this change is really that bad. The only thing, the first thing that comes to mind is that when you take Baron, normally you use 2 brushes anyway. You put 1 brush on top of Baron and then 1 brush on top of your teammates. To have the bigger brush and then just more area. So you're already going to be using 2 out of the 3 brushes normally. All that this means is that now you have to commit the 3rd brush to actually obscuring the vision around the objective that you're trying to capture. So not the biggest change in the world, probably not going to have really any impact on Ivern games at all. So I think that it's pretty okay. Karthus, Q casting made more fluid. Q lay waste can now be buffered. I think this is interesting. It'll definitely help out the players that are playing in ping that shouldn't be playing Karthus anyway. But I feel like this is actually a pretty big buff to the Korean Karthus mains that are like in Challenger and High Masters and stuff because they're already pretty scary as it is. And so while their ping is virtually negligible, it's like 8 or 9, just the entire concept of buffering I think is going to be very helpful. But it's a nice little change. I think that they did this as well with something like Gragas before, right? Where they made stuff bufferable. Okay. Lissandra, Q damage scaling up, passive cooldown at later levels. Iceborne, 18 seconds at all ranks to 18 to 9 seconds scaling at levels 1, 6, 11, and 16. So they're saying here, we want Lissandra to be more rewarded for her good positioning by getting to land multiple ice shards. Currently, that often just leads to her running So we're giving her more access to the mana from her passive as the game goes on. The reality of the situation is that Lissandra doesn't go past like 15 minutes. She's never going to go auto mana, and if she does, then it really is a testament to how bad the player is, not the champion having a problem with the passive. So this passive really is just a buff for all the bronze and silver players that are playing Lissandra. And I I don't care how bad that sounds to say, it's the reality of the situation. In competitive, this sort of a change doesn't really impact her nearly enough. The only thing that maybe you could argue might impact her is the 3-second change right here. I guess the 3-second change is applicable to competitive play and high MMR, but that's the only one. The level 11 change doesn't actually come into play in pro play, because level 11, she's going to either have her blue buff or she's already going to have one of her core items, which fixes her mana problems. And if people are thinking that she can now itemize out of mana type items because of this passive change, I think that's ridiculous as well. Q, Ice Shard, ability power ratio 0.65 to 0.7. Lissandra doesn't, normally she's going to be overkilling people anyway, so this is only a buff against tanks. Because she already overkills as it is, and this type of an AP power buff doesn't make it so that she can itemize any differently. So these two changes are okay, like whatever, like super, super, super minor buff. There was a term that someone actually on Reddit used recently, and I really liked it, so I'm going to talk about it, where it's a placebo buff. So these might actually be placebo buffs in the sense that now it makes people pick up Lissandra again. Although in mid lane, she does have some rough matchups right now. Up in top lane, she has some okay matchups. It's just going to become a question of if she can become viable again or not. And I think that she can in very specific instances. I think that she always has been able to be picked in very specific instances. So it's not the end of the world, but I think that whatever 7.9 and 7.10 have in store for us can really dictate whether or not we'll see her a lot more. Malzahar, armor down, voidling health down. Armor from 20 to 18, that's not the end of the world, although it does affect him in bottom lane. He's losing 2 armor. W, Void Swarm, voidling health 3 to 2, that's really, really, really big. That really hurts support Malzahar. Voidling gold reward 10 to 5, that's not the end of the world. It just basically means that someone's going to lose like 100 gold after laning phase, and so that's not super bad. Nautilus, mana regen per level decreased, E mana cost increased. So base stats, mana regen growth stat 0.7 to 0.5, okay. E Riptide, 40 to 80 mana to 50 to 90 mana. This isn't going to break him. I know that there's a lot of people out there, just like, you know, on Reddit last time that told me I was an idiot because other analysts claimed that Maokai was going to be gone from the meta after those changes and he was just unplayable. He wasn't unplayable. Pro players and high-level players know how to manage mana to the point where these type of nerfs and changes aren't really going to impact too much. And the way that Nautilus itemizes in most of the matchups anyway, he doesn't have a problem with mana, and he doesn't have a problem with how he interacts in the laning phase, whereas Maokai sort of did to a certain degree, but it still wasn't enough to bring Maokai out of the meta. So Nautilus is still here to stay. Ryze, Q cooldown resets on WE cast, not hit. Okay, cooldown resets occur when a Rune Prison or Spellflucture are cast rather than when they hit targets. Okay, much like Karthus, Ryze's quick combos create a large gap between low and high ping players by decreasing accessibility to his combos or making his resets a bit more fluid to bring that. Okay, that's nice. Shen, Q does less damage to minions but more to champions. Our shield scales with missing health. Now this is one of the buffs that sort of made me look at it like, what the fuck is going on? Like, did someone have a bad game where they were playing duo Q at the Riot office and they were playing AD carry and they had a Shen person that was duoing with them up in top lane and the shield just barely didn't hold, or like the Shen player like lost a trade and the other person had like 10 HP remaining and they just decided like, you know what, that's not cool. So they decided to fucking just randomly buff him. Doesn't make any sense. Shen has been seen as a monster, especially in the LCK, as a response that is basically needed to be banned against the likes of like Nautilus and Maokai. And he's really someone that can keep some of the more meta top laners in line. And he can also really enable some of the meta picks that also existed inside of the ADC and jungle role, not just in LCK, but across the world in LCS. Although I don't follow LPL, so I don't know exactly how common he might have been seen there. But Q, Twilight Assault, damage 30 to 110 against non-champions at ranks 1 through 5, to 50 to 40 against any enemy hit. New Monstrous Determination deals double damage to monsters. So they buffed his jungling, although I don't really see him as a jungler, especially again because not the spot that Cinderhulk is in. Yeah, but the buff to champions is a little bit ridiculous. I think that's definitely a little bit weird. So that's a little bit surprising to see. It's a nice buff for him though, so whatever. Shadow Dash cost 180 energy to 150. Thick width increased from 100 to 120. I don't know off the top of my head, but I feel like this is the width that Shen lost a very long time ago when they changed his dash. These two buffs in themselves are really fucking just weird. They're really out there because Shen is in a spot right now where he is viable, and he's mostly used as a counter pick. These type of buffs push him more so in the direction to be a versus all, even though he's not quite there. But again, they're just completely out of left field, and I can't understand it. Our Stand United cooldown, 180 to 120 scaling to 200 to 160. So he's going to be a little bit more punished with his Stand United. And I think that's really interesting. Late game, it's not really going to matter too much. I don't think that those 40 seconds are really going to play a part at the end of the world. You know, it's not going to be the end of the world. Shield 250 to 850 to 175 to 525, scaling up to 280 to 840 based on allies' current health. Shield maxes out at 40% health. So anyways, they made him a lot better of a duelist, and then, you know, the ultimate is sort of nice, a nice change. I think this is pretty balanced. But the E and the Q changes are just fucking out there. I don't understand totally this direction, although maybe if something happens with Cinderhulk and then like other items in 7.9, 7.10, maybe Shen can become a jungler, because he does have terrain scaling inside of his kit, and then like as long as he can get something going for like wave clear, maybe he goes like Tiamat or something like Kha'Zix or Rek'Sai or others do inside of the jungle, that would aid him in clearing the camps a little bit more, because obviously he does like Titanic Hydra anyway. So that's sort of whatever. Udyr. So this is an interesting change where I know that there was someone in chat earlier that was asking me to talk about Udyr, but honestly, I'm not really that interested in talking about Udyr. Fundamentally, his kit is basically an abomination. It's like the Frankenstein of League of Legends. It's like Olaf if Olaf had like brain damage. The champion to me is like a bad Olaf. And this is what I was asking my chat earlier, and I've talked about with people in the past. He doesn't have terrain scaling, which means that he has a reliance on blasting plants. The way that he itemizes, to my knowledge, is a little bit more expensive than Olaf as well, and the way that he winds into it is also more awkward than Olaf. I feel like it's a lot easier to play around him than it is to play around Olaf, and because Olaf has that CC immunity and stuff, and he's able to get away with running Ghost, etc., I feel like Udyr is a little bit more impacted. But anyways, ability cost 47 to 35 mana to 50 to 33 mana at levels 1 through 18, so it's a nerf early on, buff later, you know, down the road. Q Tiger Stance, basic attacks no longer deal an additional 15% of Udyr's total attack damage as bonus damage while in Tiger Stance. Repeated maulings. Udyr's first and every third basic attacks after that while in Tiger Stance or Tiger Strikes, applying the stance's damage over time effect. Tiger Stance damage 30 to 150 seconds over 2 seconds. Go for the throat. Successful Tiger Strike since the same target will instantly deal all remaining damage of the previous instance in addition to applying a new one. Okay. W. Turtle Stance. Udyr no longer gains lifesteal while in Turtle Stance. Slow and steady. Udyr's first and every third basic attack while in Turtle Stance heal him for 2.5% of his maximum health, increasing up to 5% based on Udyr's missing health. So this is really nice, but it just sort of reminds me of like Olaf again, like just the way that this champion functions. I will be honest though that I haven't seen him in a very long time. Not that I really care that I haven't seen him, but I can't help but just feel like he's still a bad Olaf. And everyone I think already knows my stance on Olaf. In terms of solo queue, these changes are obviously really nice, because solo queue you can get away with things that you can't inside a competitive, but for competitive I don't think this really does anything to fix Udyr's problem or whatnot. I don't know. I don't know what to say about that. So that looks like that's it for the Summoner's Rift. I'm not going to touch Howling Abyss or Twisted Treeline. We're going to go to Mastery. Stormraider Surge now has a louder visual effect when it activates. Okay. The jungle, Rift Scuttler, clarity around who killed Rough Scuttler, that's nice. Krugs, now leash better, okay. Ward death audio, okay. Loot, alright. Rotating game modes, don't care about that. Q health, what is this, okay. Upcoming skins, these skins are really cool. The Cosmic Dawn and Cosmic Dust, Rakan and Zaya. Conqueror Karma, I didn't see that. Cosmic Blade Master Yi, no one cares. And that's pretty much it. Lucian's Piercing Light now costs the correct mana cost. I didn't know that was a bug. So was he spending more mana before, or was he spending less? And then I think that's pretty much it. So that pretty much actually wraps up patch 7.8. I don't think that any of the changes are really impactful for competitive. I don't think that, except for Shen. The Shen changes are very big for competitive. Everything else, this was mostly just a solo queue patch. And that's pretty much it. I think that's all that I have to say about all of these changes. So hopefully 7.9 or 7.10. I don't know what the mid-season patch is, but hopefully 7.9 to 7.10 brings a lot more because I'm really looking forward to that and seeing what ends up happening. So yeah.